We now have the data models for all of the actions print page and all of the subsidiary models. Now we need to actually link it to Entity Framework and update the UI to fetch from the database, similar to what we did with the settings page. One thing that I want to do is this default setting here, I don't want to be deletable. So at the minute we can edit and delete the default, which when it comes from the database, we don't want that to happen. So in the printer settings data view model, which will be here, we want to add some new properties, and we'll call this public boolean can edit and public boolean can delete. We'll want to match that in the print settings view model. So in here, we'll also want the same thing. This time we'll want an observable property of private boolean can edit, and the same for can delete. And this will allow us to specify that when we have the default properties, the can edit and delete, and we'll actually set the default UI to true. And then we need to honor that in the view afterwards. So we'll come back to that, but we've got the data model now set up to have those properties. One other thing specific to the data model as well, we have a lookup here for the printer settings inside of it, but we have no parent lookup for everywhere that this settings is selected for, which will be the actions tab print view models. So, or in fact, it will be the data models in this case. So this data model here, we actually have this with income comment as well. So a print settings data model, this will be the selected printer settings. That can just be a new default. And then what we want is the reverse of this. So for every actions tab print data model that has a print setting selected, the print settings wants to know about that in reverse, so we can make a database link. That will mean it's another list. It's sort of actions tab print data model, and we'll call it action tab print data models, and this will be a list of all of the top end parents that have this specific model selected. Next up, we want to now add all these data models to the database context, so they actually appear in the database. For that, it's the public DB set, and this is a table inside of a database, and we want to add these three extras. We'll start with the deepest one, which will be the print settings profile data model, and we'll work backwards up. And we'll call this print settings profile. We'll add the other two, and one will be print settings data model, and then actions tab print data model. And then we'll just give them the same naming convention, but without the data model at the end. And now these will all appear as tables in Entity Framework. The thing is, we have no references between these yet, so the only links will be the stuff that Entity Framework does automatically. So when it's called ID, it will automatically get tagged as the primary key. If you have a ID in somewhere like this, we have this ID and this named very specifically the same with the ID at the end and not ID. Entity Framework sometimes pick these up and automatically make links. But I don't like to rely on the naming conventions to do the linking for us. So instead, what we want to do in the application DB context is override on model creating. This will now give us the option to specify things, and you can see here model builder.entity, and then we select a table, and then in fact that's showing us wrong, but this is how we will do it. We'll have the model builder .entity, and now we can specify on the entity these types here, so which one we're actually referring to, and we'll start with the printer settings profile data model. And if we look in here, we can specify like has primary key for ID just for the sake of completeness. So let's start with the printer settings profile data view model as the entity, and think of this as defining the database constraints and things. Now you can have has key, and you can do this to select the key. Now this will already be done for us because that's one of the defaults. If you have a property called .id, it does this for us behind the scenes. But as I mentioned, I want to start doing this explicitly for each model so we can see it being defined. And then some of these we can do, say, has one, but you'll notice there's no extension for this. So sometimes you can append them after certain things, but in this case where we have has key, we're going to have to copy and paste the statement again, and now get rid of the has key, and we can do other things. So now we should have has one. There we go. So we can say has one, and then inside of this is where we can say it's got the printer settings data model. So that's linking it to the data model and saying that this print settings profile will have exactly one print settings data model. It will be the parent. And then combined after this, you can see there, we can have with many or with one. So this is now going to say it has one print settings data model. And now this with will be this thing. So the parent print settings data model. And if we look at that, we have multiple printer settings. So it will have many. So this will be with many. And then in here, you can see now it's linking the print settings data model instead. And we can say it has many print settings, and you can see it matches the type. So that's now just made the one-to-many relationship in the database for us. And in here now, one of the key things we need to do is make sure when we delete a certain thing, so when we delete this parent, it deletes the child, because we don't want the child to be able to exist without the parent. It makes no sense. It's a lost element. So with that, we should be able to say on delete. And in here, we have options for delete behavior. And really the only two, if you're going to do a delete behavior, is cascade or client cascade. This is all getting into very specific database structural code and how things work. So unless we deep dive into that for now, I just follow along with what I do here. And that will be to do client cascade. It's the most supported way of cascade delete. And this should now mean that when we delete the parent, it will delete the child through the reference. We don't have to manually do that. So if we now look at the print settings data model, we've linked the ID. We've linked this ID to the parent and this to the parent through this call here. And then we've set up the cascade delete. So that should be everything for the print settings profile data model. We step one up now and go to the print settings data model. We want the ID. Then we need to link in these we've actually done. So the print settings profile data model, we've linked here, so we don't need to redo that. But we do want to link this. So in a similar fashion, we have this list here we need to link. And this will be a many to one. So this print settings data model is the many, and the tab should be the one. So if we go to tab, it will have a one. So in that case, we've done the print settings profile, and then we need to now do the print settings. And then here we can just copy this. Pretty much, let's just copy it all. Change this to print settings data model. It will have the ID. Then it will do a has many. And in here, we have the printer settings, which is not the one we want. We want the actions tab print data model. And then that also has with one. And that will be the print settings, which is correct, and then the same cascade delete. That now sets up the print settings data model. So that's them two done and the ID. They're the only links. Then we step up to, I think, the only one left, which is the actions tab print data model. So we'll have an ID again. And then I think we've already set up the to one with this. So in theory, we don't need to do anything with this because it's just the ID. And we can let that auto-generate. Or we can start doing what we mentioned, which is explicit for everything. Because this one was auto-generated, we didn't do anything. So let's just keep everything explicit here. Let's just do settings for the settings data model and always declare the key. It's a bit superfluous because it really is auto-bound, but again, it doesn't hurt to just be explicit there. And this will now be the actions tab print. And with that, we should have all of the binding done. So this should add to the database. And now we need to link everything in with the actual code. So if we take a look in the actions page view model, we have this that we need to get rid of because it says to do so when we get a database service. So we'll cut this out of the way in a moment. This will be the default we need to generate. We'll do that in the database service. So similar to how we got the defaults here. we'll do another public function, and what was it we were returning? Print settings view model. So it's going to be, and this is data model, so it's going to be a list of print settings data models. And this will be get print settings. In here is where we'll do the default, and at some point do this. So let's just comment that out and leave it in there somewhere. We'll do a var settings as new settings, do something with it and return it. So at least the function's correct. And now if we go back to here, design time only, we have here fetch print profile. So this is now pulled from database, and we need to pull the print settings profile view models. And this is where we need to return a list of print settings and ultimately convert them to a view model. So again, we need to cut all this, and to be honest, all of that, and the whole thing is going to return or set the print settings. And it's actually creating the top level print settings view model, which contains the inner print settings view model, and those then contain the inner print settings profile view model. So really, we have a fetch that wants to fetch the top level print settings data model, which contains everything else, and we need to convert that all the way down to a view model. So there's quite a bit to do here in one go. The first step is to cut this out, move it into the database service here as well. Let's just dump all the code we know we were doing, comment it all out, go back, and then this now wants to be something from our call. So all we want to do is invoke a call here to give us a list of print settings view models. And this is a list of print settings data models. So we can get the print settings, which will be the database service. Do we have that in here yet? We don't, so we need to inject the database service. Then we can consume it, and in the design time, make a new blank. And now in here, we can do database service.get printer settings, or settings equals. And then we need to convert to a view model. And so we can do that in here if we wanted. So we could do, we're going to rely on the fact that settings is always going to return not null. And then we can do print settings, a list of data models. So we can do settings.select, and in here we can do a new, and what's this expecting? Print settings view model. And then inside of here we could fill it with the data, and then here we can do, I think it's an observable collection, so new observable collection. There we go. And now in here, we could set up the view model. So we could set like id equals f.id and start doing the conversion here, name equals f.name. So we'll just put for now to do finish converting from data model to view model. And then we can just focus back in the database service first, that we know we need to do all of these things. Another small thing I've noticed again, legacy, we call it fetch print profiles. We want to rename that to fetch print settings. And then after we do the fetch print settings, we also have the fetch print actions data, which is calling fetch print settings and then setting the print list, which is an actions tab print view model. So this should be saying fetch print list, really. And then this again, to do fetch from database, we're going to do a similar thing. If we look at what we did here, we just pulled the settings and then did a conversion. So we need to do a similar thing here, which means we need another call for a public list. If we look at what we're after, we want the actions tab print and then data model. So actions tab print data model, get print list, and then for print list equals new, return print list for now. And then here's where we need to do stuff. And this is where, again, we take all this dummy data we got here, paste it into here and comment it out for now. So we know we need to do something there. get the settings or get the print list. So this will be print list equals database series got print list. This will be a new observable collection. It will be a print list dot select new, and then it's going to be a actions tab print view model. And then here we will fill it with what we want. ID equals, oh, we haven't done the F. There we go. F.id. Name, is it? Job name. F.job name, and so on. So again, to do this is now going to be convert from data model to view model. This should stay the same. We still hook into the events. We update IDs, store the state. So I don't think any of that changes. I think the delete will come back to. We're going to get too deep into too many partial working functions for now. So we won't handle this. This will just be UI delete. The same with this delete. I think the same with edit. Let's just leave all the other stuff now and just try and get these two functions working, because this is quite a lot of work to be doing. So let's bounce back to the database service first and try and get, let's say, this one working. So the goal here will be to pull print settings, and if there's no settings yet, then we might want to make the default one here like this. Otherwise, we can leave it with what there was. So let's first just say settings can actually be context.printSettings.toList. Now, you wouldn't normally do this again if this list is going to be huge, but in this application, it's never going to grow significant, so we're just going to load everything from that database table in one go. But just bear in mind, this is not something you'd normally do with a lot of data. Then we can say if settings dot count equals 0, we can now do add default settings, and that will be what this was. And this won't be that, it will be settings.add new data model. And then in here, everything is pretty much the same. Populate printer settings. Now, printer settings are all pulled in, and the printer settings, which we've just done here and duplicated loads, wants to be this fixed list every time. So these sizes for this application are always fixed. These are the sizes we need. So we're going to return this exact list every time we create something. So we'll want one that simply returns the list by default. And then instead of just doing this print settings equals and repeating all this over, we can call another function that gets these exact settings. So this part can all be cut. We'll have in here for now a private, and then we'll have a list of print settings data model, I think it is, get print, printer settings, get printer settings. And this will always be, or print settings we've called it actually, return, and then an array, and then in here, we can make each one up. So that would be a new print settings data model, and we don't have type in there. Why don't we have type? No, it's printer settings profile data model I'm thinking of here. Yeah, this is what we want to return. So this is actually get printer settings data. There we go, that's what we want. And the type there, now we can specify all of these types. So A0 size. And then we're going to rely on this data model's defaults being what we want. So basically being blank, the UI can then use default. Or in this case, paper size wants to be the special string default for now. Width can be -1, height can be -1, orientation is default, source tray and color default. So these will be the default values. And then all we have to specify is that type over and over, which is the equivalent of what this is doing. This was just specifying a random one, so we don't need that. And this can now be returned. And then we could call in here var printer settings profiles equals get printer settings profiles. And we'll just say that. Now we'll change all these to match all of these. That's all them now returned. And then we can simply call this whenever we create. In fact, we will need to expose that for that reason. Whenever we create a new printer settings, we want to invoke this to get the default list to fill out. So for now, if we pull the settings and it's 0, we can move this inside. And we don't even need to keep that in a separate list. We can just delete that, and this to-do printer settings here now can be this. That's now pulling from database. That doesn't need to be done. And there we go. So we simply fetch from the database for now. If it doesn't exist, we create the default, and then we'll handle when the user creates the values. And when they try to create a new one, they can invoke this to pull in the printer settings. And when they save, it's already there. So that function should work. For get print settings, that one should work there. Now we've got to do the get print list. The print list is the higher up level. So this is the actions tab print view model that we need to now get a list of, which is effectively the data model. And we'll do basically the same as this here. We'll get the settings. If there's 0, we'll do default. So what we want to do here is, instead of doing that, we'll do the context dot, and then we have the actions print tab dot to list again. We'll get them all. If print list dot count equals 0, we'll then create a default item. Now, the thing here as well to bear in mind, this is something we'll fix as we go and later down the line. This means that every time the user deletes everything, if they genuinely want to delete everything, when they then come back into the page, it's going to automatically create the defaults again. So bear in mind, defaults are something you want to just always exist regardless. Or if it's a one-time creation thing, just setting up example data, we'd want to have a flag in the database somewhere as to whether we've already created these default items before. So for now, this will just be auto-generated every time the list is empty, but just bear that in mind. So in here, we want to then do, and in fact, saying that, we didn't save anything here. We just, if it was blank, added them, but we never committed to the database. So this might be okay. You might not want to bother doing that until you do something else, or we might want to just do context.save changes to commit them to database. So I'll do that here, and we'll do the same thing here. And then now let's just create this single one here. So instead of creating both of these, let's get rid of them. We'll create just this one. And for that, we will do print list dot add new. And now in here, ID is auto set. We don't need that. Got job description, drawing range, this, and that should be all done. The printer settings ID, however, that's something that won't exist yet. So we could either get the default, or we could leave this off, because this will link to a specific printer settings. So this will pre-select a printer settings. Now we should always have one because of this call here, guaranteeing that we have one. So what we could do is just always select the first one for the default item. So in that case, we could do context.printer settings.first, because we know we're always going to have it. Or in fact, not doing that. Yeah, there's a point. We wouldn't get the first item if we hadn't already invoked this call. So we need to be careful there. So considering this is only when there's a blank list, and it's not that intensive, let's also just call here get printer settings to ensure we have at least one. And then from that, we can now do context.print. In fact, why have I got context underscore and context without an underscore? Should be the underscore. Context.print settings.first. .id. And that will do for now. And then the only thing we're relying on here, which you'll see if this works or not, because we've fetched from the context a list, so that when we add stuff to the list and save, it should commit to the database. If not, you might have to find we do it a different way, but let's just presume that's going to work first. Oh, and we don't want to specify that ID, that should be auto-generated. And I think that's enough now to see if we've made any mistakes. I've already made a mistake apparently, opening that bracket. And because we don't use migrations yet, we need to delete the database. So let's just open up the folder, close down Rider, delete the database, and restart. And now we've done that, let's just run and see if we even have anything remotely like what we expect, which would be those two lists to be populated. And as expected, unable to open database. So this is where it's going to create the database for us. So you can ignore that error once. Let's go to actions, and there's a crash. So what have we done wrong? Here we go, sequence contains no elements. So we get print settings, we have nothing. And this is where we said we're adding to a to list. So because we've to listed, this might then break the tracking link inside of the context. So the first thing to bear in mind here then with Entity Framework, once you pull in from the context and you've made a list, these items now are trackable as properties inside of them, but the list itself isn't tracked. So if we add to the list, it's not going to add anything. So instead of doing settings.add, what we actually do is do context.printSettings.add, and we add it straight to the database table. So that's something to bear in mind. I just wanted to show you guys that's how you might think to do it by default, and then you'd realize that actually it's not going to work. And then we'll do the same here. So instead of doing this, you do context.actionPrint.add. We'll go to actions. We'll go into here. You can see it's already actually run, and it must have created this. And again, this will be the designer running the code for us. So we know it's already worked because it's literally not 0, and that's from the designer. And then I guess if we step over that now, that works. And then we apparently have nothing in this list. Let's just reload that and see why. So there's something else down this chain that we haven't correctly linked in. Oh, we do. It's just empty because we haven't finished binding things, and all this is empty because, again, we haven't bound. So it was working. You can actually see we have 2 there. So we should have 1 there, not 2, which is a problem. And you can see there's actually no values. Did we not set this correctly? And a quick look at the database in here, and we've obviously made quite a big mistake because there is no entries for these items. So what we've done is, I've never noticed, we didn't actually do getters and setters for properties. We just used normal members. So none of these have actually been created by the database. That was a complete oversight there. So let's just fix that. And that's because we copy and pasted the private members from the view models when we did this, and never really gave it a thought that we should have been doing getters and setters. That's the actions tab one. We've got the print settings one now as well. So the same here. And for this one, oh, we seem to have done it for a couple here. And I think that's it. Let's build, and that's built. Let's close down, delete the database, delete the settings, and restart. And then when we run again for the first time, it's going to recreate the database. And now if we go here, we have a print list, and this time, oh yeah, it's 0. In fact, why is it still 0? That shouldn't be 0. So we still got something wrong there. But it seems almost like the second time we run, we ended up with stuff in. So let's see if that happens again. If it's like running it twice, fetches the data. So back in. Yeah, so there's something, a delay behind. There we go. Now we have values. So we're getting a bit closer. There we go. Print only drawings. This is the text. We have a default here. Inside of here, we have still the wrong thing. So there's a load of bugs everywhere now from where we're up to. Let's see if the database at least looks right first. For the actions print tab now, we have the ID, job name, description, print range, drawing. Everything there looks correct. Print settings. We have the defaults, and then we have this extra one here that shouldn't exist, so we've got a bug there. This one we have all the sizes. And again, this will be a huge list because this is going to obviously duplicate for every single item because all these can be unique to each specific job. But there's the first default one. So one bug is this double here. And another bug is we have job name and description and all this lot, but that we haven't actually bound. So the only issue there is the binding. Let's fix the first one here so we can visually see what we're doing, and that's to finish off all this conversion. So this should be pretty simple. Just go through everything here and match it with everything here. And that's it for that one. They all map 1-to-1. So that should be that out of the way. Then we need to do that for this one as well. So that's all that done now, except the printer settings, what we've called, and this is where we're going to have to do something different. So printer settings is actually named wrong again. It wants to be printer setting profiles. And then that now needs to be loaded by the call to the database because this is a nested list which won't get pulled automatically. So now this will be printer setting profiles, and then we need to convert here. So a new observable collection, and inside here we can now do a list. And inside of here, we could do f.printer settings. And again, let's rename the printer settings to printer setting profiles. And now because lists inside of data models are classed as separate tables and separate fetches, when we do the get printer settings, we'd have to explicitly include them. So you can't just do printer settings.toList. What we'd have to do is printer settings.include. Now in here, we can tell it to explicitly load the printer setting profiles. And this will then make the SQL query also load this list. So these are all things you'll start to become aware of as you use Entity Framework. And again, you wouldn't normally just blindly keep including extra things and to listing the entire database, because if this was a large database, this would be a huge call. But I just know the limits of this application. This is never going to be too big to just fetch everything. So it's nice and simple for us. So this will make sure that list is populated. And then inside of here now, we can be assured we have this. We can select on that. And this will be a profile. And now we can do a new view model. So now we have a nested view. And we can now convert the printer settings profile data models into view models. So you've been here before, you know what to do now. This will now be profile.id. And then we're going to repeat all these. And there we have that. What I've done with the key value pair, because I realized after, when we need to restore this, we don't know the list of the drawing colors and the orientations and the paper sizes. They're dynamic in some cases. So I figured, considering the key is just purely for the view model, let's just make the key the exact same thing as the value. We're going to have to change the code potentially for this to work, but I think that will just automatically work. So that will now convert all of this. And I think if we've done that right, we should at least see those default items. And we'll just be dealing with that duplicate we had somewhere by mistake. Design time data now is complaining. Why is that complaining? Oh, because that's now printer settings profiles. So again, I'm not sure why the IntelliSense didn't work correctly here. Sometimes it doesn't seem to auto rename for us. Same again here. Profiles. And now let's run this and see if we get what we want. We go to actions. There we go, much better. We have a print only drawings. All this is populated with the data we had. We got the default. We edit. We have all the sizes, which if we sort are all correct. These drop downs don't select default, so we need to fix that. But all the settings have loaded in, so that's a good chunk of the way there. I think what we'll do is just fix this duplicate item here, and then we'll call it a day on the other items because this video is getting quite long and we've covered quite a bit here. You can see we're now actually loading from the database though, which is key. So we have these items in and all this is correct. I think the only bug we really have is this drop down list because we've changed the key. Everything else looks like it's pulled from the database correct. And we just have this duplicate entry here to figure out. So let's just step through this code. If I just run this to clear the database nice and quick, we don't have to keep deleting the database. And now if we run the application, we're going to see what happens each time, because something's clearly wrong with the database binding, I think. We go to actions, we have no settings, so we create the default settings. So after this, we can now check, say, the print settings, and there we go, we have one element in there, which is what we want. And for the actions, we have none. So that's as expected. Once we do that, it will return that. And now the print list comes in. There's nothing in the print list. It ensures that everything exists. There's already one in, so we shouldn't duplicate at this step. Let's just double check. One item, no action. Now here we want to create the actions tab print data model. We're going to set the printer settings ID to the first element in here, which there's only one, and it ends OD9. We do that and save, and now we have two. So we have OD9, but we've got this extra FO4, and in here we have this FO4. So there's something wrong with the way we've bound this. So we linked the printer settings, but we didn't link the printer setting ID. So what we've done here is it has many of them with one, but we also need to set the key. So after that we've got foreign key, printer settings ID. We missed that part off. So now we will have to delete the database in order to recreate it. So close this down, delete the database, and start up again. And then now if we refresh this, we still have two. So I think what's going on here is the ID has to be correct. We've got it. But if you look at this printer settings, it's going to new up. I think this is going to be the problem. This is going to then new up this class. And because it's not null, Entity Framework then won't bind to this, and it thinks you've made a new one because it doesn't know which one to pick. So the issue is going to be definitely this. Let's just not new up the class because that gets pulled in by Entity Framework because these are linked together. And let's just make sure we haven't done that anywhere else as well. So I think the same with these lists, because they'll be lazy loaded in, we don't want to new them up. Otherwise that would override the Entity Framework stuff. And then in here, same again here on the data model, because that's linked here, we're going to have the same issue. So let's make sure we get rid of that. And everything else is just a property. So that was a mistake on the data model side. And now I think if we run this code again, empty the database, go into the actions, this should now run. We don't see it here, which is still the problem. It doesn't refresh. But do we now get the single item? Yes, we do. So now we've got a single item in there, and it ends in 9.4, and in here, it links to 9.4. So that's fixed the issue we had. So the only issue left is why don't we have it when we first enter? If we tab out and tab back in, I think you'll find it's now got the correct thing. One item, one entry. We open up here, we have all these, and obviously we know about the drop-down issue. So the only issue left here is why when we first load in, when it's an empty database, does it not instantly populate this list? I'm going to leave that bug and this bug in here for the drop-down and sorting alphabetically for the next video. Well, considering this has been so long already, you can see how much work's actually gone into changing the dummy code from just generating view models to actually loading from the database. There's been quite a lot more work here than I expected for replacing these out. Even though we did a good job to initialize the data in view models and put nice comments on replacing with database calls, there's still quite a lot that goes into it. I've also noticed the new settings doesn't pull in that settings we created either, so we need to fix that as well. That's it for this one, guys. I'll catch you in the next.